Hi, my name is AJ Cordero, and you're listening to the bonus podcast episodes around the short doc that I made, Poppies at Vendôme. That covers the service of Carl Andersen, who's now 88 years young. And on this episode, you'll hear a little bit more from Robert Boutilier, who is the NDG Legion President. He's featured in the documentary, so if you haven't already seen it, it's less than 10 minutes, so check that out on YouTube. It's in the description. If you've already done that, then you already know that Bob is a treat. I had the pleasure of speaking with him last November, and because I couldn't use all of what he shared in the doc, you're getting it here now. So let's dive in a little bit more about Bob and his service with the Canadian Armed Forces and what he noticed about this year's Poppy campaign.
So I was 30 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, mainly in the artillery and engineers. I retired as a lieutenant colonel and ex-commanding officer of the engineer unit. As being the shortest and skinniest guy all through classwork and stuff, let's just say I was subject to being bullied, okay? So being in the armed forces to protect people who can't protect themselves from bullies, and I mean things like international bullies, so that's part of it. And the service part of it as well, as we describe what we do in terms of helping the veterans with the Poppy campaign, and helping the community with people that don't have resources but they need a place to meet. That's ingrained in me, and it's part of what we do here as well. The Poppy campaign this year was what I'm going to call as average, but above average in one area. I was out doing the old fart speech, dressed up to schools this year, more schools than ever before, 8 schools. So the youngsters are getting exposed to it more, and that's the future. Is not talking to people over 50 or 60, it's talking to the youngsters so they got to understand what's going on. And in some ways, changing the orientation a little bit from thinking, oh yeah, this is all in memory of World War I and even World War II, and it's the people that died. Well, no, it's up to today, including Afghanistan and post-Afghanistan, and it includes the people that were killed, the people that were wounded, and their families. And emphasizing that, along with the fact that the idea of soldiers dying or getting injured, sort of a them and us, okay? No, it's an us and us. Canada has a history of citizen soldiers going back hundreds of years. It is us. There isn't soldiers and then the civilians and the rest of us. Our history isn't to have a large permanent full-time force. It's to be citizen soldiers, a small permanent force, and then in time of need, the citizens come together. And that's really the background, and that's what I enjoy going to the schools to talk about. And some of the questions I get are very interesting and mature from the kids. So that leaves me optimistic. That makes it worthwhile. The awareness of people, just the pure awareness, not like or dislike, just the pure awareness hasn't been there for decades. It's starting to come back a little bit now, but it's slow. You know, I'm a professional dinosaur. Yeah, it'd be nice to have it back like the old days or blah, blah. No, the old days are gone. What are the new days and what are the future? It's starting to come back now with more awareness. And one horrible thing that started it is with the deaths of our soldiers in Afghanistan. When they came back to Trenton and were hearse convoyed to wherever, and we had people over the overpasses with Canadian flags recognizing that, that was probably the first comeback in 20 or 30 years about even recognizing that the armed forces existed. And the attitude, unfortunately, of the regular forces, when there's some controversy, is to hide on the base and not go out there in public in the uniform. Even tell the militia and reserve units not to wear the uniforms in public. And I find that disgusting, and I obviously disagree with it. So just the awareness is starting to come back. And I think it has to start with the youngsters, and it has to start with the reserve as well, and the militia. And people, it's like waking up from a dream, blinking like they didn't even realize that the armed forces existed, okay? It wasn't a dislike, it was just a total lack of knowledge and appreciation. Well, a month ago, we buried our 43-year-old veteran who was our treasurer here. He was a helicopter pilot, he was an RMC graduate, and a Air Cadet Squadron RSM. And I think he's almost most proud of being the Air Cadet Squadron RSM. It carried him through right through the adulthood, right through to today. Well, getting back to the Poppy campaign, the poppies are there. First of all, they're not sold. We give them to people. If you want to make a donation, fine. If you don't, no problem. Thank you very much for wearing it, okay? I know there's an attitude out there sometimes from some people, but our attitude is to be, thank you very much. If you make a donation, that's great. Otherwise, thank you for appreciating it. In the last year, I spent more time and money supporting veterans than I have in the previous 10 years. And we're talking now Afghan veterans and other types of veterans. We're not talking about the 90-year-old veterans. We're talking about the 40 and 50-year-old veterans. And it's a very noticeable situation right now. Unfortunately, the government years ago had cut back on veteran affairs, and they're trying to come back a little bit to provide services, but they're still short-staffed and short-moneyed. So the Poppy campaign is meant to be a very fast response to that. I gave you an example before about a couple we were supporting and their children, and supporting them with money too. Because why? Within 24 hours we can have money in their hands to feed their kids. So that's the real use of the Poppy Fund money, is to help individual veterans in need. The Poppy Fund does not contribute or get spent on the tables, chairs, and the facility of the Legion here. It gets spent on individual veterans to help them. The Legion is the coordinator and center of authority for Remembrance Parades. The big city keeps the 11th of November, which was a Saturday this year, for the downtown thing. Instead of having a dozen things competing with it, the other entities are told to use the Sunday before that as a thing. So Sunday the 5th of November, we had our parade up at the Vimy Monument in NDG Park, soon hopefully to be renamed NDG-Jackie Wallace Park. Okay, if you remember NDG, you know who Jackie Wallace, anybody know who was 60, 70 years of volunteering here. Okay, just passed away a little while ago. That's right. So Mayor Gretchen Katawa, last year, it was her 1 year anniversary of getting elected, and her first sort of outing because of COVID. And we had the parade there, we had people there, we had cadets there, we had engineers there, we had people, we had a gun firing a salute there. She was super excited. She says, before I could pitch her, she says, we're going to do this way next year. And we did it this year again, the same thing. So that's getting back out there.
Bob sees a new way that legions like the one in NDG have to operate, one based on inclusion of the community.
Putting my dinosaur hat on again. It used to be an image of exclusivity. You come to the door to the Legion, you're met by an old guy in a jacket and tie, says, let's see your membership card, blah, 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 sorry you're not a member, go away, unless you're with a guest of a member. That's the exclusive attitude. That died out years ago. Now it's at least under me, it's an inclusive attitude where anybody is welcome, and the Legions always has a policy, anyone can join, anyone can join. It's not just restricted to veterans, which a lot of people thought. No, anybody can join. And in small communities, the Legion is the community center, where everybody of every age, every sport, every school, whatever, that's their community center. It's an inclusive attitude. And that's what we are here too. So we're bringing that back. COVID really hurt a lot of the Legions, particularly in the urban areas. So we're still trying to recover from that. And people they still don't know that so-called lack of awareness I talked about for the armed forces and people in uniform. It still applies here. So, but we contribute. We have various institutes like Girl Guides and AA meeting here for free. And I say, you're here for free, you make a donation. That's part of our community service, is to do that. And we're doing more and more of that. The two sort of greatest activities we have here in the last 2 years are celebration of life for people that passed away, not just military, but civilian and spouses, and 1-year-old, 2-year-old birthday parties. So the two extremes, okay? But that's great, that's good, okay? That's what we're here for. So it's being seen as a service to the community is what I'd like to be. And that's not something that happens overnight. It just happens one event, one person at a time. And it's gonna take years. Also, we're sitting now in the half of the building that was built in 1940, with the other half, the main hall, being built in 1970. Okay, so the new part is over 50 years old. And so doing the maintenance in the building is a challenge, and keeping it up and having it regarded as a go-to place for the community, because we're a little bit off the main track here. But that's a challenge that everybody faces. So there's very few of them left at that generation, and there's a big age gap. As I mentioned, there's 30 years worth of people in the regular force that don't even know the Legion exists. Don't even know it, they're not aware of it. They may recognize the name, and they may see things on November 11th, but other than that, it doesn't even exist. It's not in their DNA anymore. So there's just like society in general, there has to be a rebuilding going on. And I will say one thing, the image of the Legion being for veterans only, well, that's passé, and it never was. With the veterans dying off, and the not just the wives and families of veterans, but associates from outside the community. In a lot of legions, it's been the civilians that have kept the legions alive for the last 20 to 30 years. Now there's a new generation of veterans, like from Afghanistan, the 50-year-old, the late 40s veterans that are starting to get involved and recognize the Legion again, that are starting to join. So what goes around is coming around a bit, but this idea of exclusivity is gone forever. It's an inclusive attitude in the Legion.
And of course, we had to talk about the man, the myth, and the legend, Carl Andersen.
Doing triathlons till after 80 years old, until his back problems really had him stop, okay? What's the most famous one-legged Canadian you can think of? He was honored last year, I think even by the news, and Terry Fox's brother was out here in this Legion because he's been in, I don't know, over 50 Terry Fox runs and very great participant in the Terry Fox Foundation. Crazy. Triathlons. Crazy. Crazy. And hey, I'm crazy too, so I recognize another fellow crazy, but I haven't done any triathlons. But he walks the talk like you wouldn't believe. This year he was back, because of his back, I got him a nice cushioned chair so he could sit at Vendôme with the Poppies, okay? Because he was reluctant, he couldn't, because of his back, do standing or sitting for a long time. He's still doing it, okay? Still doing it. And because he says he'll do it till he dies, because that's in his DNA. A neutral guy, a supporter, a positive guy, not a negative guy like me. He's a positive guy. I need people like that to complement my grumpy old man personality. But he's a super person, super individual. He just lost his wife a little while ago too. Yeah.
You sat in that chair.
And this is funny because we're sitting down to talk now. In the old days, from his generation, when you're talking to somebody, you stand up, okay? And he'd be sitting there, somebody go and chat with him, he'd stand up. But his back, he says his back was suffering, yes, because of what he was doing, God bless him, okay? And he raised over a few $1,000s for the Poppy Fund as well by doing what he's done.
And to finish off our discussion, I asked Bob about his hopes, which he wanted to redefine.
I'll be blunt, because the two best types of torture are waterboarding and hope, okay? I'll call it my bucket list, just to change the word, okay?
Sure.
Okay, now my bucket list, I had a few bucket list items. One was to have 50-50 ex-military and civilian on the committee. That's about what we have now. So that's one good thing. Secondly was to see, let's say, service to the community, to offer this. And we're seeing this, as I said, with guides and with AA and stuff like this, and we'll continue to do this, to provide a place for those that can't find a place or can't afford it, because everybody charges money these days. One aspect of that, by the way, we're a sponsor of an Air Cadet Corps in LaSalle. They still train at the school, but every time they want to do an additional night, it's $500. Same thing with the Naval Cadet Corps of Donnacona. There's a lot of recruits in Donnacona this year, so they've limited space for the cadets, so they come here when they need it. And the same thing even with the Air Cadets at the RMR. If they need it for their recruits, they'll come here for first aid training or whatever. Doing that, again, that's a major thing on my bucket list, is cadets, as we talked about before. The third one is the most challenging, and that's to get boots on the ground, to get people out, like on the Poppy campaign. I'll be blunt, for fundraising, we can have a container with poppies in it sitting on a counter someplace without somebody there. When we have somebody there in uniform, we get 5 to 10 times much more money, because they're giving to a human being, not to a box. And that's still our challenge, massive challenge. We're running on a handful of volunteers now. And our challenge is to get more people out of the woodwork to get volunteers. So if you know crazies like me willing to volunteer in an insane place, come. We're only open Fridays from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. because we don't have enough volunteers to man the bar and keep the place open longer than that, which I'd love to have it open, just for people to drop in. I'd like to see this place filled with young people just sitting down there, relaxing, doing their own thing. That's right, and that's probably the biggest challenge and least attained to date. It's easy to have a bucket list to do stuff, but reality kicks in real fast, and you realize it's one event, one person at a time. Is if you try thinking, oh yeah, by next month I'm going to have 50 new members or whatever, you're going to get frustrated and not going to happen ever. You do it one person at a time, one event at a time. For instance, next year is our 80th anniversary, and we're already starting to plan stuff. Well, it's going to really start from March to December and July 1st we're going to have a community open house here, family oriented. You know, we'll have bouncy things in the parking lot, and we'll have all sorts of stuff, free food and drink stuff. I'm not going to charge a thing
I'll be back
on July 1st, okay? There's no such thing as a restriction to what group can be a member of the family. Everybody can be a member of the family, is what I say.
My thanks again to Robert Boutilier for speaking with me on this issue. You can find out more about the NDG Legion on their website, and you can even give a donation to help if you'd like. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to check out the other 2 companion podcasts, one that features a longer conversation with Carl, and the other that gives a behind-the-scenes look at the process.